Pei also mentioned it's the symbolism in some of the African American gardens, some of the objects that were in the gardens. Can you elaborate on some of that?
There are lots of elements in the yard that that have significance, and these things, I don't know whether we've said this, but these things are traced back to Africa. People have studied the homes in West Africa, in Nigeria in particular, in the Congo, and seen that these traits that exist here in the African American homes can be seen in West Africa also, which is really amazing, wonderful so that though the gardens change, there's also a tradition that holds. So what are the things that stand out? Well, when you see a garden, there's a real sense of this being a place that is open to visitors. There aren't really fences exactly. There are sort of boundaries that are created that you can tell, and a yard is enclosed. But they're open, and there's not usually, I guess a few times I saw gates, but often it's just really open, and there might even be like a little mat right at the entrance to the path that would take you into the yard, which is really pretty amazing. So there's a sense that you are welcome to come in, and that this space is a social place. From what I've learned and read since starting to do this, it's more typical in a white yard that the social place would be behind the house, the patio in the back of the house, the place where you have the barbecue, stuff like that. A little garden room might be at the back. And the African American houses, it's more often that in the front there would be an actual sitting area, place where people would be kind of welcomed in. So there's a sense of you're welcomed in. There is also there are various things that are placed in the garden that are there to remind us as we enter that we're being watched, we're being seen, and we should act with decorum. We should act respectfully. And some of those things are what some of us call watchers. And these are creatures. These are they're figures, and they can be human, or they could be birds or animals, and they're often placed at kind of near the front of the yard, near the corners. And one of them by Ellis Stewart, there's a jockey sitting right in the yard, so a black jockey sitting there watching us. And Inez Faust's garden, which I think is, and on her front, she's sitting on the front porch, and she's this beautiful older woman. And on the post, right beside her, the post that holds up the roof on the porch, there's a doll right up there. So these creatures are there, these watchers are there to remind us that we should behave well, that we should behave properly as visitors, and I think respectfully to the people who were coming to visit. So that's pretty wonderful. I had no clue when I made that photograph. I saw that doll, and I thought that's really kind of amazing. So a little white doll. So often at the borders, there would be rocks that are painted white. Well, things that are painted white are very important. I'll come back to that. Rocks are often brought from your place of birth, the home in which where you were born. If you move, you would take it to another place. So rocks are very important. If they're painted white, they're especially important because white has several, couple of meanings. One is that things that are white are considered sacred. Also, it's a sign of good character. So this kind of goes back to those creatures, to those watchers, to remind us to behave well. Let's see, one of the yards that's just emblematic. It's so perfect. It's in Jackson, Mississippi. It's Eula May Owens' house and her yard, and I'm standing fairly far back so you can see the house and this great big fabulous tree. I think it was a kind of laurel tree. And around the yard are tires that are set up like a fence, kind of like a white picket fence in a sense. So there are tires standing on end all around like a little fence. And they're all painted white. A lot of things are painted white, either white objects or white painted things. In front of those tires is a row of rocks painted white. And there's also another little row of bricks. So a lot of boundaries reminding you, this is a very special place that you're going to enter. It's a secure place. It's a safe place. And I saw other yards that had these multiple kind of boundaries, I would say, these markers of the division between the yard and the outside. But this was interesting because it was in Jackson, Mississippi, a city, and this sort of in a place where a lot goes on. Not all of it's really safe and comfortable. So this woman had created a place that was safe and was a reminder to the people who were going by. In this place, you behave well. You behave properly. It's really nice. It was really beautiful.
Let me ask you this. With this project, why did you choose to use black and white versus color?
To start with, I have to say I was mostly a black and white photographer. I did all my serious work in black and white. Of course, I did snapshots in color and so forth, but I was really a black and white photographer. But still, taking gardens in black and white's perhaps unusual, because you would think that you would want to photograph the colors, the pretty colors of the flowers and the leaves and all that. But that wasn't really what I was struck by. It had more to do with a kind of a spirit and an energy that I felt when I was in the yard. There was really a magic to it, and I wasn't interested in the prettiness that existed, but more in the beauty that was deeper, in a meaning that I think was lower. And I think maybe it's because I have trained myself to see that way, that I see lights and darks and the importance of light, and the shadows and the spaces that are created that way. But that's how I saw them, and I think it enables us to see the garden in a different way than we might have thought we would. So these gardens have, I really do believe that there are, there are pipes that are stuck in the ground, and those pipes are there to help us communicate with the dead. Communicating with the dead is very, very important because they're our ancestors, and we learn from them, and our life is cyclical, and we move from life to death and back to life again. And having that communication is really important. So you walk into this garden, and there's more there than simply the pretty flowers. And I think a lot of us have that sense in one way or another that there's a spirituality, whether it's something related to God or the creation of life and so forth. There's something very powerful about being in a garden, but these are very different, and I think that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we, because they're in black and white, we start to see that we have to see things differently than we thought we did. We have to look at things in a little bit different way than we usually do. Water is the separation between the living and the dead. So there are lots of symbols related to water. Seashells are found on African American graves. Seashells were found in gardens that were nowhere near the sea. I found one in Wilson, North Carolina, on Oliver Freeman's yard. He made all kinds of objects. The one that I have photographed that's in the book is this kind of big round urn, and it's made out of, well, I guess, cement with shells all put in it. It's beautiful. And he did it. He put shells in all kinds of things. Well, the shells are a reference to water. So are pipes, the pipes that communicate with the dead. There are porcelain toilets. There are even bathtubs. There's a faucet. There are a lot of water pumps. One of the great gardens that I photographed is in Louisiana, and one of the boundaries on it is this huge arch that's bigger than the house. It's higher than the house. And next to it is a really beautiful white painted sort of typical kind of arch made out of wood and so forth. But this great big arch is part of the boundary. And inside this arch, if you think of it as two-dimensional, are two water pumps that are painted white. So very important. Just next to that are a couple of toilets. Just if you look really on the edge of the picture, you can see there are some toilets and a couple of sinks, all beautifully white, but all references to water. So water is that space between the living and the dead, and therefore it's really the way to the spirit world.
Going back to 1987, this has been a big project. Is there any part of the project or a specific garden that's really impacted you?
Well, first of all, sort of in a general way, my garden has been affected. My garden has changed. I no longer have a lawn. I've seen these yards that are just filled with plants, or if they're not, swept dirt, which is very clean and orderly and very calming. I don't actually have swept dirt in my yard, but I have done away with sort of the lawn, and I have a lot of plants, and they don't look as sort of orderly and organized as one of those formal gardens in Europe. I have a lot of objects, and the objects have meaning to me. I actually have always treasured rocks, and always brought rocks back from special places. If I visit somewhere, I'll bring back a rock. That's my favorite souvenir.
You've taken a lot away from this project. What are your plans for the future?
Well, I'm actually working on another project, which began right as this one was, I guess, coming to an end, which in my rather, I don't know, dopey way, I thought, starting a whole new thing, isn't this wonderful, good for me? But it's not new. I'm photographing up another place and a very different culture, but it's the culture that I am from. And it's Prince Edward Island, which is in Canada. I didn't grow up there. It's where my father grew up, but I went every summer for a couple of weeks. My father didn't have a long vacation, but we would drive and go there. We even drove, when I lived in Louisiana, which I did as a kid, we would drive all the way up there and spend my father's 2-week vacation of the year there. So Prince Edward Island is, in a way, my home, because my family moved around a lot as I was growing up.
Thank you for joining us at Artsee Live. Thank you to Vaughn Sills for being with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
You can find more information at artseemagazine.com, where you can see other interviews, archived issues, and you can subscribe as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.